Good evening. We want to welcome our viewers of the Johnson City Government Information Channel on Charter Cable Channel 192 and Comcast Cable Channel 17 to this live telecast of the September 12th, 2017 Johnson City Regional Planning Commission meeting. This meeting will be rebroadcast on Friday, September 15th, 2017 at 12 o'clock noon. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. Call the meeting to order. And if Commissioner Cooper will go ahead and open us with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, first and foremost, be with those victims of the flood and hurricanes in the southern part of our country. Help us all to find ways to support them spiritually as well as monetarily. Also, please be with all of the military people overseas that every day protect us and provide us the freedom that we all enjoy. And finally, give us, this group, wisdom to make decisions that are in the best interest of this community. We plead this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the next item up on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Have a motion for approval or any changes?
Move we approve it.
Have a motion?
Second.
A second. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next will be approval of the minutes from our last meeting on August 8th, 2017.
Move we approve.
Motion for approval.
Second.
Commissioner Cooper, Commissioner Sandos. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We will move to new business now, and the first order of new business will be to consider the approval of a subdivision replat.
Subdivision being presented before the Planning Commission for consideration. It's currently a 2-lot being converted or subdivided into 3 lots. This property is at the intersection of Lower Street and Forest Street. The subdivision meets all requirements of the subdivision regulations except one. Namely, the requirement that a 25 feet right-of-way be dedicated by the property owner on Lower Street. The property owner there is currently only about 15 feet of right-of-way existing on Lower Street. The property owner is able to dedicate 25 feet from the pin at the intersection of Lower Street and Forest Street right up to the pin marked on this plat as L3. From L3, however, up to the end of lot number 3 as proposed, the property owner does not have sufficient room to dedicate 25 feet minimum right-of-way without encroaching significantly on his driveway. There is only about 22 feet of driveway length that he will have after the subdivision. If he were to go further, if this were to be reduced further, that will affect how much room he will have to park his car without encroaching into the public right-of-way. This particular area does not have on-street parking. That is not permitted. All parking has to be within the property. This is an old neighborhood with all utilities already in place. This is the street we're looking at, which is Forest Street. This Lower Street, sorry. This is the house on this piece of property. Utilities are already in place. This subdivision has placed all those utilities within the public right-of-way. The fire hydrant, for example, will be within the public right-of-way. The overhead utility lines, they will be within the public right-of-way. And there is a sewer line already in place that will also be within the public right-of-way. So all public utilities are already in place. Now, the 4 feet right-of-way variance will not affect future construction of sidewalks or verge. Right now, we require a minimum, the curb, the street as we see here does not have sidewalks, is not curb. Curbing and addition of sidewalk in future will require minimum 2 feet of curb and 5 feet of sidewalk. That is 7 feet already. The street verge or the grass verge that it separates the paved section of the road from the sidewalk, per our subdivision regulations, we require minimum 5.5 feet, maximum 7.5 feet. With the 4 feet variance, we will still have about 2 feet to work with of verge. And that 2 feet will be okay because we will not need to put in new utilities. That verge is usually for the lane of utilities being needed. The utilities are already laid here. That will not constitute a problem. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve this plat and grant the 4 feet right-of-way variance for Lower Street.
Thank you very much, Hassan.
You're welcome, sir.
Have any questions for staff?
So that we don't foresee any need in the future for that additional right-of-way?
No, sir, at this time, we don't think we're going to need all the 7.5 feet in future. We will have enough room to put what we need because the utilities are already in place. If utilities were not there, I would say yes, in future, we're going to need that much land for the installation of the utilities.
But we'll have more right-of-way after this.
After this, yes.
Even though it's not up to the code, we'll have more than we would if we just left it alone, all right?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
So we're better off.
We'll
All
have,
right.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
Great. Any further questions for staff? Thank you very much, Hassan.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay, we'll go ahead and open this up for public comment for this subdivision replatting. Is anybody here wishing to speak for or against the matter at hand? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment section and open it up for discussion amongst the commission.
Move we approve.
I have a motion for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I assume that's with the variance as stated by staff.
Yes.
Okay. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Lowe? Commissioner Cooper?
Yes.
Commissioner Benedict?
Yes.
Commissioner Sandos?
Yes.
Commissioner Wild?
Yes.
And Chairman Zilens.
Yes. Thank you. So I'll move on to our next order of business, which is to consider the subdivision preliminary plat approval along Bristol Highway where the Baxter Street is currently, and we're looking at abandoning that right away. So if you're ready to go ahead and present.
The application before the commission for consideration is the approval of the preliminary plat for Hudson Automotive, which will include closing the current Ed Baxter Road. It's important to underline that this is only looking at the preliminary plat approval. The abandonment of the right-of-way itself was considered by the Planning Commission at its meeting in July, and it's being considered by the City Commission. Now, it passed on first reading, passed on second reading, and just as the Planning Commission recommended, it's been put on hold until the Planning Commission approves this final plat, this preliminary subdivision plat. The developer has acquired this piece of property made up of 6 lots. He will be combining them into 2 lots, and he proposes to construct a new street. Staff had done traffic counts on the existing road that was considered at the meeting in July by the City Commission. With 2 alternatives, that a new road be either constructed off of Merida Drive, extending off of Merida Drive, or from Tucker Lane. These were the 2 options that we had on the table for consideration. The designer worked on both and submitted to staff for review. The city looked at them, considered the option of Tucker Lane. We considered the option of Tucker Lane at the west corner, which is right here, we have significant topographic issues that can create potential line of sight problems if the road were so constructed. Secondly, at the intersection with Bristol Highway, we have a TVA power pole, which is very significant. TVA has an easement in this area for the guy wires. So if the road were to be constructed at this particular location, that pole will have to be moved. Even if we consider the option of a median just for the pole, just put a pole in the median, we still have the guy wires to deal with. And TVA has all that. The guy wires extend right up to the end of the property line. This whole area, that's where we have the guy wires. So there'll be basically nowhere to put the road, unless TVA were to waive its right to that particular easement area, which is not the route we want to take at this time. The second option was to align the road with from Meride Drive, which is this option. Staff sent out notices to the neighborhood. There were about 210. We increased the list this time from about 95 we had first time to about 210. Those notices were sent out. From the calls that I received, there were some of the residents in the neighborhood who were concerned that locating the new road off Meride Drive will be too close to Green Valley and create a situation where cars will stack and will not have sufficient room if they want to make a left turn on Green Valley. We went out, measured the distance from where the new Ed Baxter Road, if so approved, would be to Green Valley, and that is over 900 feet. That 900 feet, that's over 30 cars, 30 to 35 cars at a time. We'll have to stack in there for there to, not to be room for any other person to enter. Secondly, there is a traffic light. If you go further north to Bristol, there is a traffic light coming to Johnson City, which once it goes red, there is room for cars making a left turn on Green Valley to proceed without any problem. The road being proposed, the plat would therefore involve two lots. There will be one big lot to the west and another small lot to the east. The developer is proposing two driveway cuts on the new road to both lots. The road itself will be constructed as local non-residential. It will be a local non-residential street, which means it will have a 55 feet right of way instead of the 50 feet that we normally require for local streets. It will also have a multi-purpose lane. For local streets, we only require sidewalks. Local non-residential will require a multi-purpose lane and then a sidewalk. This can be used for bikes or sidewalking, that will be provided. The road will also have a left turn lane. The current Ed Baxter Road doesn't have any left turn lane entering on Bristol Highway. That will be constructed as part of this particular subdivision. There are three issues that engineering has requested based on city standards that this particular plat should show or should be revised to include. One, a deceleration lane on East Mountain View Road, considering it's classified as a collector street. So it requires a deceleration lane, 75 feet with deceleration lane topper. The same is required, a deceleration lane is also required on Bristol Highway going into the new road. Currently, there is about 10 feet. There is 10 feet out there, which doesn't meet city standards. We require 2 feet is required for curb and gutter, and then the lane itself 10 feet. What you currently have there right now doesn't show. This needs to be the current curb and gutter needs to be moved further backward 2 feet in order to provide for enough room for the deceleration lane, and it has to meet the 100 feet taper length. So staff is recommending that these be approved subject to these three elements: the deceleration lane on East Mountain View Road, the deceleration lane on Bristol Highway, and the width for the deceleration lane being increased to the required 12 feet. These are the three elements. At the meeting in July, the Planning Commission had noted that these preliminary plans should be brought before the Planning Commission with two other elements. One, a traffic study on Bristol Highway, and another smaller scale study that would be done by, or was to be done by, the developer. Having looked at this plan and the scale, the City Commission has considered the scale of the traffic study that will be needed on Bristol Highway. That has been discussed at the level of the City Commission. Secondly, TDOT is also working on a corridor study that extends from Johnson City right up to Bristol. And we have staff from all the cities involved in this process. We believe that it is staff's opinion that this study, working with TDOT and the City Commission all together, we can make this study happen sometime in future. But that study will be bigger than what this project entails. As such, we can move, the Planning Commission can move forward with the approval of this plan without requiring that.
So you'd recommend waiving the requirement for a developer-based traffic study that was lesser in focus at the last meeting?
Yes, sir.
So that would be part of what we need to deal with today.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff?
Oh, I have one question. The road that has been abandoned, Baxter, were there deceleration lanes either on Mountain View or on Bristol Highway for it?
No,
No.
no.
So-
There's no deceleration lane on Mountain View. On Bristol Highway, it's not really designed as a deceleration lane.
For shoulder.
It's more of a shoulder, yes.
So this will actually gain the deceleration lanes to increase safety from both
Both ends.
Mountain View and Bristol Highway.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
This is basically the improvement in what there was in the past.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and open up the public comment portion of this consideration. If there's anybody here wishing to speak for or against this preliminary plat approval, we'd be glad to hear from you now. If you do, please just go ahead and approach the podium and give us your name, your address, and we'll be glad to hear you.
Hello. Hello. My name's, thanks for letting me have this opportunity to speak. My name's David Weir. I live in the neighborhood that would be affected on Woodcrest, which is the second street in,
Can you give us your address, please, sir? just for the record?
3702 Woodcrest.
Thank you, sir.
And you see those two driveway cuts for houses on the other side of East Mountain View, right by Marydale, the east side? My backyard, I don't know how to use that, I don't have a computer. Good thing. So, you know, it's gonna, you're putting a road where there never was a road that will impact us. I was rooting for Tucker, but I can see that's pretty well gone. You're gonna do a lot of, you're gonna make East Mountain View busier with all the construction up there, and what is gonna happen on the right side of the road as we look at the picture right now? Does anybody know what that's gonna be? Because that's kind of a small section of the Ford property.
Song, I mean, if you feel like you can answer his question quickly, okay, I'd rather otherwise hear his public comment.
Referring to track 2?
Yeah.
Nothing has been submitted to us yet. Usually that will come in the construction plans.
Okay.
If anything will be there, will be the construction plans.
Okay, so we'll discuss that when the construction plans come up? We get a chance to debate that?
Now, the construction plans will be approved administratively by staff. They don't come before the planning commission for approval.
Oh, they don't, okay. Well, since we don't have anything to discuss there for us little people, I would suggest that they do, those people right on the other side of East Mountain View and me, we're going to get impacted greatly with a major road where there never was a road. If there could be landscaping in there, maybe we could make that somewhat attractive, since that's what I look at from my screen porch in the back of my deck, and maybe landscaping all across the back. Are there any plans for that, as far as you know, Osanga?
The zoning ordinance of the city requires landscaping. This property is currently zoned for business, but the subdivisions behind is zoned for residential. So that transition requires a buffer, and it will be included in.
Sure. I think maybe the best way to deal with this is for you not to interrogate our staff as if you're on our commission, but instead,
Okay.
go ahead and give us your concerns.
Yeah.
We'll be glad to write them down, and then we'll ask staff on that on your behalf, and that's going to work better that way for everybody, okay?
Good.
So we're glad to hear from you, but let's try to keep that order moving forward.
Okay, well, Asange said that there would be 900 feet between Green Valley and Marydale, the new Marydale. What about getting rid of the road altogether? Having no road there, and putting a stoplight at Green Valley, because somebody's, you know, if you're coming out of our subdivision at Green Valley and you're turning left to go to Bristol, you'll think you've got it, and then all of a sudden somebody will be turning in, and you'll almost get nailed from somebody turning into the subdivision. So, I mean, somebody was telling me years ago, a lady got killed down at Carroll Creek, and that's when they decided to put a stoplight down there. So I think before somebody gets nailed anywhere, a stoplight at Green Valley with a left turn signal and everything would slow the traffic down, as much as a deceleration lane going into the Ford place. So that would be my preference, is to look at the potential for putting a stoplight at Green Valley, eliminating the road altogether, and that would certainly make my property and everybody else's more just as valuable as it is now, and not hurt our property value. So and I've talked to some residents in my neighborhood, and they like that idea, particularly the seasoned citizens who live there, who might have trouble judging time and distance. So, I'm pushing for that. It's a big impact. Just bought my house in April, or March. So I'd like to see no road whatsoever, since it's going to impact people all along that road.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, yes, sir, please come up. Give us your name and address again, too, please.
I'm Mark Mattson. I live at 3713 Meadow Green, so I live in that affected neighborhood. Let me just say, I was worried that it was simply, Ed Baxter was simply going to be closed. So in generally, I'm pleased there's another road that is going to be open, so I was ignorant about that. But I would like to address maybe some of the issues that Mr. Weir did. There are some real traffic concerns on Bristol. People are going incredibly fast. It's very hard to judge distances. Coming off of Green Valley, and trying to turn left is frequently a nightmare. Traffic gets slowed up onto Green Valley, 5, 6, 7, 8 cars, people trying to turn left, and it's very hard to judge distances. I think the nice thing about Ed Baxter was you had quite a bit farther. You could go down there, and there wasn't the hill, so you could kind of judge distances very well. So I'm still somewhat concerned about traffic as well. And I guess I would second, maybe at some point, whether or not you put this Marydale Extension Road in or not, to think about a light on Green Valley, because it's a nightmare place. You have traffic coming in from Powell Construction, from coming in off of Zeke's, in and out of the car dealership and with Enterprise Car Rental there. And there's just a lot more people living now up in Hunterwood and Cardinal Forest now than there were. I've lived there 17 years, and traffic's about 2 or 3 times what it used to be. So, but I think in general, at least this is having another route. I was afraid it was going to be just one route with no light, and that scared me to death.
Thank you very much for your input. Again, I think from our last time, 2 months ago, when we spoke about this issue somewhat, there were a lot of questions that popped up in regards to traffic counts and flows and morning rush hours and turns and a lot of legitimate concerns about flow on Bristol Highway itself. Maybe not necessarily specifically how Ed Baxter impacts it or not, but about frustrations along that road. And I think that the conversations with city and staff and engineering that have occurred since we met at that time, it helped, that was good input from the community, and it helped spur some discussions among staff that, yes, a more citywide or regional authority look at how traffic flows there would be a good idea. And that's, I think that's what they're talking about, having good discussions about looking into doing. And in some ways, that's a separate issue from what we're talking about, this particular plat. So I want to be clear that your cities listen to you, and they are having discussions when it comes to those issues, and maybe it's not specifically this plat. And that's why we had the recommendation from staff to waive the developer's traffic study, because a more inclusive, possibly more comprehensive traffic study is being looked at. And that may be a better way of addressing those ideas, because it's not so easy to look at that and say we need a light and a light and a light, because that road did have certain traffic flow philosophies that even the regional folks, TDOT, is probably going to have an opinion on. And so just to let you know, it hasn't been fallen on deaf ears. It is a bit of a complex traffic flow place because it is a large, artery for flow in and out of the city. Everybody understands that. But as far as what we're talking about today, the discussion would be around this particular plat approval. But I did want to say, since we have a number of folks here, that your concern's certainly been heard. So, anybody else wishing to speak for or against?
My name is Lee J. Lynch, and this is my wife, Gina. I'm pretty concerned because I'm the one that actually we own this piece right here,
It's zone commercial.
and it's zoned commercial
It's
right
a
now.
duplex.
Get your address again, please.
3702.
Okay.
East Mountain View, and it's a duplex, a
And-
brick duplex that's right on that main road right there. And actually, the back half of that goes up against the Bristol Highway, and they own that.
That's,
So they would own the road to the left, to the right, and to the back of us. So we're kind of like sandwiched in
when they
right
purchased the property, they bought both sides. And the one thing I'm a little bit concerned, and I know this may not have anything to do with this setting right now, but I had someone leave a note. I guess the real estate person that was handling the real estate for them, and I've actually kept the note. But they told us that they had a big interest in our property. And I said, well, I need to let me know, because I've had long-term renters in my both units for quite some time now. And when the houses started moving on both here and here,
the Bristol Highway.
and all the way through there, when they started moving those houses out, my people that had been there for years, I didn't want to re-sign a new lease with them, thinking that something's going to happen. And I put a couple of calls out to this gentleman that left a note at my house, basically saying they're willing to pay you what it needs for this property. Please call me and let me know your thoughts. And I've not heard anything else back from them. And I guess, like I said, I'm pretty concerned about that, because I need to know what I need to do from my side of it, as far as, do I need to go ahead and start, I got people questioning, are the units available or not?
And the grass all around there is now all grown up,
And
so
it's-
it reflects our property. It makes it not so desirable if we do put new renters in there. So we don't know what to do. We're kind of at a standstill, and we don't know what's going on
Okay.
at that point. So,
Questions? Thank you. Appreciate it.
thank you.
And we're open for anybody else wishing to speak for or against. Yes, sir, please.
Yes, good evening. My name is Wayne Sprague. I live at 1305 Windsor Lane, which is directly behind the area that they're talking about up there. Is there somebody here from the Ford dealership?
Again, let's not turn this into an inquisition for the folks in the audience. Please give us your comments, sir.
Okay. I'd like to know if they're planning to put up a wall across the back of the property for sound abatement. Is there going to be a sidewalk go down the property, tied into the other sidewalk that's up there already? And what are they going to do with the speakers that are on the property? Are they going to have hours that they can use the speakers? Or is it going to be just all day long? Is it going to be early in the morning? Is it going to be late into the evening? I have no answers for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else wishing to speak for or against? Or in the middle?
They're not going to be metal. Excuse me. I'm Bill Henderson, live at 219 Marydale Drive. I guess one of the questions I have, or a couple of questions I have, is the meeting back in July, we talked about the traffic count, and that was going to be part of all this happening, and how did that get shuffled off as far as that goes?
I think that's what I was trying to describe a moment ago. It was because that the traffic impact study, after the city folks had a chance to take a look at it, was deemed that it really wouldn't be as helpful to have a limited site study, that the questions that were raised would be more germane to the flows that are happening up and down Bristol Highway as a whole. And that would be better handled with a larger traffic study than what a developer should or could be responsible for. And so to require that for them to do for this particular development is probably not fair. The other thought of that is that our engineering groups were fairly confident in looking at their requirements on this plat for decel lanes, left turn lanes, and traffic mitigation for what they do, that they felt comfortable with what the plat was offering as well. And we can ask Mr. Cantrell to talk to that later.
And the other question is on the deceleration lane is, if for some reason our fair city, Johnson City, is against putting traffic lights in, so, we've fought that battle for 20 years that we've lived there. What about a deceleration lane in the Bristol Highway when you're turning left? Because now you're going to add, that'll be the only car dealership on that side of the road, which is where residents live. The other side of the road, it's great having all the dealers over there. And you wouldn't believe the amount of people that drift over looking at the car dealerships. I mean, I'm guilty of it myself.
Your
So it's a suicide mission when you're turning left onto, whether it be Ed Baxter Road or whether it be Green Valley. So just for instance, just recently, was it Captain D's opened up here in Johnson City, and they put that nice little concrete turning lane right there. What about something like that? I mean, the deceleration lane to turn right off the Bristol Highway is great. Love that idea. Like the idea of the right turn and left turn lane off of Baxter. But coming into that, if we could do something to break up those drifters, because that's where accidents they do happen. I mean, I see them all the time, and we're missing the big ones right now. So, and then when you add another dealership in there, you're just adding more fuel to the fire. And then also with Mountain View, now Mountain View is going to be an access point to get to the Ford dealer, and so that traffic is going to pick up immensely on Mountain View. And that concerns us with all the kids that live on that street and in our neighborhoods and so forth. So that's my point.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
I'm Jim Baxter, and my business address is 3711 Bristol Highway. But I wanted to be noted in favor of the fact that at the last meeting I came to about this, Ed Baxter Road was talking about being abandoned, and I thought that also meant the name would be abandoned. I went to a lot of trouble to honor my father by asking the city to name that road where our business formerly was, Ed Baxter Road. And I like what that says up there. It says the new Ed Baxter Road. I just wanted to be noted for that.
I'm glad you came to speak about it. Thank you. Good job. Anybody else wishing to speak publicly? I'm glad to hear you.
Good evening. I'm Bill Coleman. I live at 1004 Whitling Wood Drive, which is a subdivision off of Mountain View. I just have two questions. Is the approval of the abandonment of Ed Baxter contingent upon, or is it independent of approval of the new street? Because the notice I got was simply about abandonment. It didn't say about replacement. So is that a joint thing, or is it independent?
And what we did in July, and decided in the July is the abandonment would take place, correct me if I'm wrong here, staff, but upon two contingencies. Number one, that this body would approve the preliminary plat before the third reading of the city commission, and that's what we're doing today. So the second condition that must be met before Ed Baxter can be abandoned is that the city must accept the new Ed Baxter, or street, that would be there.
I'm happy with
So those two things must take place before the existing Ed Baxter can be abandoned.
Thank you. My second question, we were noted that there's a curb cut on either side of the new road into the Ford properties. What about curb cuts on Mountain View?
That's exactly right. There,
I don't think there are.
Mountain View, which
go ahead.
is in front of the residences. Will there be any curb cuts between the two blue lines?
I'm going to hold your question here, and I'll have A-Song step up later to answer that, okay? Any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing nobody else wishing to speak for or against, or in between, we'll go ahead and close public comment, and we will open up the discussion for staff. I heard a number of things, common theme, again, the concerns about the traffic up and down and how it flows on Bristol Highway itself. And again, I think that's something we've talked about before that should be addressed and looked at with a traffic study. We can talk more about that. There's specifics. A-Song, if you don't mind coming to the podium, and if you can address buffer requirements, because the real question that came up again and again was buffer requirements and sidewalk requirements. If you don't mind discussing that in relation to this plat development and what we're talking about there. If you can just educate us on buffers and sidewalks, we'll start there.
Take the one that is easier, or the one that's easy, sidewalks. Sidewalks will be required. And I should add that it's not shown on this, it's not very visible on this plat, but yes, sidewalks will be required on the new Ed Baxter Road and on Merida. There is a sidewalk that currently ends around here, about this point, that they will have to connect to the entire length of the property. The zoning ordinance requires that, and that will be constructed.
Excuse me, is there a sidewalk on Mountain View?
On East Mountain View, there's a sidewalk that ends somewhere around here.
I mean, will there be one as part of this
There will be,
development?
it
Yeah.
will be required,
So
yes.
you're going to have
Will
pedestrian.
extend from the Meredith to the
Right,
new
to the new Ed
Baxter.
Baxter, yes.
Okay.
That will be required.
But it's not on the plat.
It's not on this. No, it's not shown on this plan. It's not, so we need to make that a
Right.
part of the requirement,
Right.
contingent.
Now, is that not in the city's codes and ordinances, or no?
It's in the city's code of ordinances, but it also needs to be shown on this plat.
We need to make sure the plat's cleaned up, but the
Yes.
city does require it already.
Yes.
Exactly. Mr. Cantrell had something to add.
because the city's ordinance, the zoning ordinance, already, East Mountain View Road is already constructed. I mean, the road exists already. This developer is not the one building this road. Any road that the developer is building, he has to show the sidewalks on that preliminary plat. So Ed Baxter Road, which he is constructing, he has to show the sidewalk on the preliminary plat. But if it's already an existing road as East Mountain View, the sidewalk has to be included in the construction plans, not required in the preliminary plat. It has to be shown on the construction plans because the road already exists.
That's where it's going to show up, but it's going to happen one way or the
It
other.
will happen. Without that road, we will not put our stamp on it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That answers the sidewalk question. Tell me about buffers.
This property, the Hudson Automotive or Ford property, it's zoned for business, before. The adjoining neighborhood at the back is zoned for residential development. And the landscape ordinance of the city requires that for this transition, there should be a buffer. The buffer is required. There are different levels of buffer that are required, and the city forester enforces that. There are different levels of buffer that are required. That will have to be included. With respect to whether a wall, the zoning ordinance does not limit the developer to only a wall. A wall can be used for a buffer. You can have a wall and a row of trees for a buffer, or you can have 2 rows of trees for a buffer, spaced differently. There are different standards you can meet for those requirements to be considered satisfied. You can use a wall and a row of trees. But I think that the issue of the wall was brought up more from a noise perspective than from, buffering for maybe sight and so. The municipal code has a noise ordinance. There is a noise ordinance in the municipal code. That goes to the extent of specifying how much decibels of noise you can have in Johnson City at particular hours. It specifies that in the municipal code. And the police department enforces that. I think they have a meter, they go around and they measure how much noise you're producing in an area. If you exceed that, they will cite you for it. So there is a noise ordinance in the city, and the police department is charged with enforcing that.
Right. Okay. What about specifically near the duplex? Whenever that's not...
There will be a buffer will be required around this duplex, and on the side, on the rear, and on this side, a buffer will be required.
Okay.
Because the buffer requirement is not only applicable to the zone, but to the use. So the property is also zoned for commercial use, but its current use is residential. So the buffer will be required.
Is there an opportunity for, sometimes developers will have a community meeting with folks whenever they're getting ready to develop a plat, like a CVS comes in, we see things like that, and they'll kind of discuss with folks, hey, what would you like to see here for a buffer? Is there a place for that, or are they going to move on to final plat on this with the buffers, just basically with the city discussion, and that's really up to the goodwill of the developer? How does that work?
The minimum requirements in the zoning ordinance, that's what we will enforce. However, just as you mentioned, there are those instances where the developer, good neighborliness, will discuss with the adjoining property owners what they may want to see around there. I think that's something that we will leave it up to the developer and the adjoining property owners to have a discussion.
So we've covered the buffers, we've covered sidewalks. This may be something that Mr. Cantrell can speak to, the D-cell left lane, the opinion on that, and I'm guessing I know the answer, but I just wanted to hear it from Mr. Cantrell.
Is there a turning lane there presently?
There's a left-hand turning lane in the middle already.
Yeah, the use of D-cell left turn lane, I'm not familiar with that. The center turn lane is a two-way left turn lane. Generally, you will occasionally have people who are coming at the same needing to pass each other, and you get into this standoff situation. But at an intersection, not a driveway, you're not supposed to cross the intersection in that center turn lane. You're either going to turn left one way or turn left the other way. And those stripes that exist in the middle of the state highway, the yellow lines, will have to be eradicated for this new intersection to be proper. In other words, the two-way left turn lane cannot extend across this new intersection. It'll have to go away. It'll be erased in that area. I checked the images of the current Ed Baxter, and that's the way it's striped now. You're not legally supposed to continue on down that left turn lane across that intersection to turn left into existing car dealerships today. There's not enough room for a concrete barrier to be put in to keep someone from using the left turn lane the wrong direction. Occasionally you'll see somebody, if there's a dedicated left turn lane into one direction, you'll see somebody get in it the wrong way. A concrete raised median could prevent that, but you need at minimum 6 feet of space to put in a narrow concrete strip. And I don't mean 6 feet of concrete, because we can't put concrete right on the edge of the travel lane. It has to be set back at least 2 feet from the edge of the travel lane. So for each direction, you got 4 feet of setbacks, and then you're left with 2 foot minimum for a very thin concrete medium. The center turn lane out there is roughly 12 feet wide. So take away 6 for that, you've only got 6 left. And that's not wide enough for a turn lane. So it's not physically possible without widening the road to do that. The Captain D's was mentioned. There was a huge, almost 25 or 30 feet wide, hatched off stretch of asphalt between the 4 lanes. It was technically a striped off median that you shouldn't be using to park in or turn left in, but people did, because you can drive on paint. And before TDOT would approve the driveway for the new Captain D's, they required the extra precautions of the concrete medians you see there. All these setbacks I mentioned were accomplished because of the extra space there. So that was a case where it was done, but there was room to do it.
One more question, if you don't mind. The question's been brought up of traffic lights on Bristol Highway yet again. And that's really, again, something that TDOT's going to want to have a say in, and that's on a broader traffic scale and flow that would be better represented with a larger traffic study. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
Yes, the larger traffic studies should do a better job at defining where such traffic control should be located. It's not a simple process. I know it sounds like we're against traffic lights. Traffic lights do help you if you need out, but it's also a delay to the flow on the main road, so it's a fine trade-off. That's a state highway. The state does not own traffic lights. They put that burden on local governments and counties. Very few counties own traffic lights. They permit them. They put all the liability on the city. All the cost is on the city. The permit and contract we have to sign with the state puts liabilities on us. In other words, the state won't take the responsibility of being sued for accidents that happen at this traffic light because they allow the city to put one up. To be able to put it up, we have to meet minimum requirements. And there are 11 requirements. 1 out of 11 has to be met. You only meet 1, but there are 11 opportunities to get a traffic light warranted and permitted. We have to show either accident rate, warranted either on accident rate, traffic volumes, peak hour flows, all these things. No doubt that there's probably a traffic light warranted somewhere on Bristol Highway. Exactly where, I don't know. It may not be at this new street, it could be. But generally, you would like to find a location where you have 4 approaches instead of a T shape, so you get more. Traffic lights are very expensive. Nearly 10 years ago, I remember this number because it was so shocking. We added another light in front of the mall. That was over $350,000 to put that light up. So it's not, a few $1,000s, and that's why there's a reluctance a lot of times, because it's just not in the budget.
Thank you for telling us more about the process.
Why doesn't the police force enforce the speed limit?
We're ready for the next staff or questions from the commission. I'm sorry, sir, we're not having public comment any longer. Any further questions for staff? Looking for a discussion or a motion regarding the preliminary plat approval.
Well, after listening to the comments here today, I'm sympathetic to a number of them, particularly having a business locate where there never was one before is something, you want your house to be a place that you can go and feel good being there, and you don't want a bunch of noise and you don't want business. But unfortunately, unfortunately, if you're living across the street from it, it is a zoned business area, and there is going to be a business there. It sounds like the regulations of the city are going to cover us on the buffer, so I can feel good about that. The traffic study, I was over there recently, and I had to come out from Green Line Road and make a left-hand turn going toward Bristol. And it's a scary proposition. It just is. Because people come flying this way and they come flying this way. And, a lot of times you have to just scoot out there in the middle and then hope for the best. And so I really get that. But I think what Chairman Zion's saying is that there's people above us who are looking at this issue, and they're looking at it in a much broader way than just this little development here. It's going to be a much larger study, and it's beyond our power to really make any of that kind of stuff happen. It just is. So, be that as it may, I'm in favor of this car dealership locating there. It's a quality outfit, and I think they'll have a good development. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve this, subject to a couple of things. One, that they widen the turn lane on the Bristol Highway to 10 feet plus the curb and guttering. Right now, it's just 10 feet, including the curb and guttering. The other thing is that there be a 75-foot decel lane and 75 feet of taper on Mountain View Road so that people slow down and make that turn into there. The rest of it, I feel like the city staff can deal with in the process, whether it's the buffer or the sidewalks on Mountain View and the rest of it. So there's my motion.
How about, would you like to include in that motion the 100-foot storage lane and the taper coming off the Bristol Highway as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so this, just as they had stated.
That would be the 10-foot wide plus the curb, yes.
Right. And then also that we waive the previously mentioned requirement for a traffic study required to abandon.
Yeah, I'm willing to include that as well, yes.
Okay.
For the reasons I stated earlier.
Fantastic. So we have that motion spelled out. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any further discussion? If you'll please call the roll.
Okay, Commissioner Lowe? Commissioner Cooper?
Yes.
Commissioner Benedict?
Yes.
Commissioner Sandos?
Yes.
Commissioner Wild?
Yes.
Chairman Zion's.
Yes. I want to say thank you all for coming out. We appreciate your inputs. It helps. I think everybody hears you. It created a significant awareness among staff last time when we just talked about the abandonment. It really wasn't so much about we're taking out one road and putting in another road. I think it sparked a lot of discussion about, hey, we don't like how traffic flows here. And I think that's been heard. We're glad to hear that. I think that we are taking out one road, putting in another road, but I believe the opinion of staff, and I would agree, is that we're putting in a better road. It's got left-hand turns, it's got decel lanes, it's got sidewalks. Even this plat's going to make East Mountain View a little better. I don't think it solves all your problems, and I understand the concerns of property owners who own property next to a large business corridor on their arterial street. But, I understand that. But thank you for coming. I hope that explains what we're looking at. So it's not that if you didn't get exactly what you're looking for, I want you to understand why. And I think that's important too. So if I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
So
Second.
Second, all in favor? All right.